Hey ladies, welcome or welcome back. My name is Aisha. I'm a certified trauma-informed coach, and I am on a mission to help 1 million women become their most confident and successful selves with the use of law of assumption. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on powerful tips, inspiring stories, and essential guidance so you too can manifest the life of your dreams. Let's get into today's video. So I am talking about the purge. I am covering what the purge is, what I believe it is, whether you can avoid it or not, and if you are feeling like you're going through a purge, how to navigate it. So when I first heard of the purge, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And what it is, or how we identify it, is, let's say you are manifesting a positive relationship with a specific person. And then all of a sudden that person starts treating you in a way that is not in alignment with you. It doesn't match your self-concept. It's really triggering. They're acting really out of character. And you're like, I've done all this work. I've done the self-concept work and I've seen progress. Maybe you've seen birds before land, which is signs that your manifestation is unfolding. So you know you're doing something right at the very least. But then out of nowhere, it seems there's all of this counter evidence coming up that says your manifestation isn't coming or that it isn't working. And oftentimes the purge builds up and builds up until it's so much chaos that you're kind of just like, what the heck is going on? Like, you feel like a little bit stressed by it. If you're good at manifestation and you do notice that coming up, maybe you're not quite as triggered by it, but I know in my early days of manifestation, I was definitely triggered by these so-called purges. The belief is that this purge is sort of getting rid of the last bits and pieces of your old self-concept. So it's pushing all of the yuck to the surface so it can be washed away. While I do believe that this happens for some people, it happens for most people actually, I believe, and what I've observed and my understanding of how other people have experienced this happen in manifestation. However, you can choose not to believe in the purge. You can also choose to believe that you have to purge every time, or you can believe that you're immune to purges. Whatever belief or assumption you feel suits you best, that's the one I want you to gravitate towards. If you don't like the idea of purges, then absolutely you can affirm against them. You can say, oh, I don't have to deal with the purge. The purge never happens to me. Like, I don't have that issue. I never experience any type of purge symptoms or anything when I'm manifesting something. You can totally do that if that is something that you desire to. I personally take the opposite route, where I like to see signs of the purge because I get more excited and I'm like, it's working. Because again, that analogy of like all the dirt coming to the surface and then being able to be washed away, it feels soothing to me. Now, my personal perspective on the purge is, for one, obviously, if you're aware that it happens, you're going to notice it more. If you believe that it's a possibility for you to experience, you're going to experience it at some point. But how you choose to view it from there is up to you. How I personally view the purge is actually in relation to understanding the nervous system. So when you heal trauma, when you heal nervous system dysregulation that is prolonged or profound, you are more likely to experience symptoms that we call the purge. The reason for this is likely what's happening is you are experiencing a deeper triggering of a wounding that's already there, or you are experiencing what is known as a somatic release, which is where that trigger will generate an emotional outpour from you. Most somatic release does lead to sadness of some sort or crying. However, it's also possible that a somatic release can come out in a burst of anger. Now, the difference between being regularly triggered and a somatic release of anger is how it feels in the body. If it just feels like anger and frustration, if it just feels like your body is overreacting to like a small trigger, that's most likely just regular dysregulation rearing its head. But if it's a somatic release of anger, what will happen is the anger will bubble up at first, but really quickly that anger will turn into a downpour of sadness, like tears. And this isn't the case if you're someone who always gets sad when you become angry. I know there are people, as soon as they feel anger, they start to cry. That's not what I'm talking about. You will know if what you are experiencing is a somatic release of anger because the anger will be so short, it will be so small, and then immediately that anger and rage, like you will be at like 110%, just absolutely boiling for only a couple of seconds, and then it immediately turns into a somatic release where you feel that downpour of tears because your body is attempting to release hormones that are helping you regulate yourself through that experience. Now, if you're experiencing a purge because of a traumatic incident that your body is releasing, it will be a very visceral experience. Your whole body, you may begin to shake or shiver. You may feel your muscles tense or loosen up in ways that they don't naturally or normally do. What I've noticed during some somatic release, and sometimes somatic release can happen without tears. I do want to mention that. What I have noticed during one somatic release is the tear was very gentle, it was very slow, and pain that I had had in my hips and lower back for years, maybe even decades, that pain released all in one go. And I actually fainted and was sort of, it seemed like seizure symptoms, but it wasn't a seizure by any means. I knew it was a somatic release. That was the weirdest somatic release I've ever had, and it was actually part of a purging process where a part of my identity died, the part of me that felt, extremely unlovable. In that moment, I had received love, which disproved all of those limiting beliefs in that moment, shattering a core memory for me, breaking the illusion of that and causing my body to have that somatic release. Another experience I had with a somatic release was also, I was exercising at the gym and I ended my workout on the treadmill, and I was like listening to songs that were kind of emotional, but they weren't triggering me. And then I was just like thinking and processing thoughts, and all of a sudden I had this like weak, almost fainting like feeling in my body where like all my muscles felt very weak. I felt almost like I was going to pass out, but not because I was dizzy or like I didn't feel like it was a physical illness. And then all of a sudden tears, just tears pouring down. And during a somatic release, the type of crying that you experience is not the same as crying from sadness. I feel like, at least for me, crying from sadness felt like I feel it in my head and in my chest. And in this instance, I didn't feel it any one area of my body. I felt like my whole body was like unclenching in a way. This was just my experience having a somatic release, so I can't speak for everybody, but those may be some signs and symptoms you notice yourself having if you're having a somatic release. Now, the reason I bring up somatic release and trauma in terms of the purge is because a lot of times when we are manifesting, when we are changing our self-concept, when we are choosing to view ourselves differently, from a previous version of ourselves to a new upgraded version of ourselves, if trauma is there, it has to be addressed and it has to be rewired to do so. Now, if you were not already privy to this information, trauma is not just a memory and an emotion. It is actually stored in your body, in your soma, which is why it's called a somatic experience. So your body, your tissues, actually your binding tissues, which is kind of like a gluey substance that binds your muscles together, it's called the fascia. That is what is actually storing and holding on to the trauma, and it can create tension in different areas of your body, which is why sometimes if you are feeling triggered, a certain part of your body will feel pain or discomfort or tightness in some way. I personally get anxiety in my upper abdomen. I feel grief in my chest. I feel sadness in my head. I feel anger, usually in the back of my neck and my shoulders and a little bit my chest, but more like the back, and so on and so forth. So obviously we are all different bodies, we are all different humans, we all experience emotions differently and feelings differently, so take this information as it applies to you. But if you are finding yourself in a purge and you have dealt with trauma, this is likely what's happening, is that trauma is bubbling up to the surface to be cleansed and washed away. That's a good thing, which is why I have a positive relationship with the purge. I see it as a cleansing of emotions that I held on to that are no longer serving me. Emotions are meant to last about 90 seconds. And I know that sounds insane. Like, most of you are gonna go to like, but my mom just passed away and I'm supposed to be sad for 90 seconds? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, the initial emotional response only needs 90 seconds to communicate to you what it needs to communicate. So you only need to experience anger for 90 seconds to understand the impact of whatever triggered that anger. You only need to be sad for 90 seconds to understand why you are sad. Now, of course, there's many reasons why you may need longer than 90 seconds to read, interpret, and understand why you're having an emotional experience, especially if you're someone like me who is autistic and ADHD. That's going to be really hard for you. You might only realize in hindsight what the emotional response was and what the trigger was and what that means to you. That's perfectly okay. But from a physiological standpoint, 90 seconds is enough to leave a mark on your brain to use as data to then interpret, which means if I notice myself getting angry, but I talk myself off the ledge and bring that anger down, I still remember those 90 seconds as, oh, I was angry for that period of time, but I regulated myself, I calmed my nervous system. Now later in the day, I can actually identify that as anger. I can identify why I was angry, and I can identify what the purpose of that signal was meant to show me in that moment. Of course, this is general advice and general information, so if it doesn't quite apply to you, don't worry. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're broken or anything like that. We're all different beings and we all experience the world in a different way. Obviously, this is, backed by science and research that we have available to us today. The science can change over time, but this is what we know, and this is also part of my experience in integrating this lesson so that you understand I'm not just talking about something that I read in a textbook. I'm talking about this in a way where I've actually experienced this. So it makes sense to me. I can use my logic and experience to convey it in a way where maybe you can relate to that. You may not be able to identify in the moment what's going on. However, if you're like me and you spend a lot of time in self-reflection, that may be when you are able to identify that this is happening. Either way, it doesn't mean that you're only allowed to experience that emotion for 90 seconds. Again, that emotion only needed 90 seconds to communicate what it needed to communicate. So if you are in sadness for longer than 90 seconds, that's perfectly fine. Take as long as you need to be sad. But remember also that the purpose of feeling sad is to get you to take an action or get you to reflect on something or get you to understand something on a deeper level. How all of this relates to the purge, aside from understanding that sometimes what the purge is itself is a somatic release. Sometimes what the purge is itself is a triggering of trauma and unhealed wounding that needs to come to the surface. In other words, it needs to go from the subconscious to the forebrain, the conscious mind, so that it can be handled. Now, if you feel like the purge is happening, but it's not as heavy or traumatic as I just highlighted previously, understand that if the purge is triggering for you or emotional for you, that's just part of your development. That is part of you recognizing that there is a version of you that exists that is sensitive to that. And there's a version of you that you are becoming that is less sensitive to that. And the more you can choose to align with the new version of yourself, the one who is not as triggered or bothered by the circumstances, the one who is able to confidently navigate their emotions, the one who sees the purge as a positive thing, or the one who affirms it away, whatever the case, it's allowing you the opportunity to transition. So that's a good thing. You can choose to see it as a bad thing, you can choose to see it as an inconvenience, but is that really going to help you? Probably not. In the end, whether you feel like you are being triggered or having a somatic experience, whether you feel like you are just noticing more negative circumstances and you want to redirect your thoughts, take it one step at a time. Make sure to focus on your internal experience and what it's teaching you, and practice emotional and nervous system regulation to bring yourself back to a state of calm and peace where you can think more clearly. Thinking clearly allows you to make better choices and therefore better assumptions. And those assumptions go on to inspire different actions. So when you are inspired to take different actions, you are acting out as a different version of yourself, which ideally, if that version of yourself is better than your current circumstance and those actions are in alignment with that new self, that means you are getting closer to your manifestation. I intend that this video was incredibly helpful, and if you are going through a purge, or if the idea of purging sounds really scary or frustrating or annoying or discouraging, or if you feel like you just need some extra support, I do have Voxer audio and DM coaching available. It is a private, intimate, one-to-one experience where you will get hands-on interaction with me. I will actually, respond within 24 hours to your exact circumstances, answer all of the questions that you have, and guide you through the process of re-regulating when something is triggering you. I know the purge can be a particularly difficult time, and if it does happen to be mental health or trauma related, I highly encourage you to seek out a professional, as in a therapist or counselor of some sort, because as much as I am certified as a trauma-informed coach, I am not a therapist. I am a mindset and manifestation coach, so I can only help you so far. And I want you to know that there is no shame if you do need to seek some type of counseling or therapy, professional guidance in that way. I intend that everything I shared with you today was helpful, and if you are going through a purge, I believe in you, and I intend that it will not last very long. It will only last as long as it needs to make you into a better version of yourself. Thank you so much for being a part of my community here. It is so lovely to have all of you ladies here sharing in experiences and manifesting all together. I will catch you in the next video. Bye.